Hello and welcome back to our series diving into specific elements of games development. In this, the third episode in our series, we're tackling the work that goes into creating a character. And there is perhaps no better time to do so. With so many loud voices both inside and outside the games development world proclaiming the magic of generative AI. And here's the thing, when the team at Torbie started work on characters, they had a problem. None of them were trained artists. So did they turn to generative technology to fix this problem, or did they find talented artisans to join their creative team? Today we tackle the craft of character design, from the concept work that goes into finding the look, how models are made and animated, how issues like scale and lighting play their part, and so much more.
Character art is probably the most important thing in the entire game. It's the first thing that players see. It's the first thing that you latch onto. It's your avatar for the game, and so having that be good is like the first step to a successful game. No pun intended, there is a chicken and egg problem that we had developing the game and the character, which is when it was just a small team of just us and we couldn't afford actually having a true character artist that has skill. I had to make the initial character and learn how to kind of do the 3D modeling, rigging and animating the character enough so that we could actually test out the game, play it, make sure the right size was there, and also sort of give like early people a representation of what it might be. And that way then we could hopefully get some funding, get the marketing going before we actually share it with the world. Because once we share the game with the world, we want it to be the best version of possible. And if they're seeing my ugly temp character, they're gonna start thinking that, oh, that's all the game is? It's like this ugly character. I don't wanna play that. With game development, the first thing you really wanna do is get a character in the world and making sure your sense of scale is right. Getting my like ugly first version of the character, we knew that we were gonna have a little bit more stylized head shape. So getting it to roam around the world to make sure like, oh, this head now is too big. I'm being blocked, the camera's getting blocked. I'm trying to interact with a tile, the head's too big. How do we solve those problems? As an example of where that went wrong, in Astroneer, our character originally was 6 feet tall, so 2 meters exact. That worked out great for a while, but it felt like the environments were too big and you're running around the environments way too long and every object felt too big. And so we just went into Unreal and hit 1.5 times scale of the character and never changed actually the real scale, which then had huge ramifications of the physics engine, how the audio attenuation works, how everything scales of distance and how procedural generation works. But it was very important for me to get that scale right early on. And so our character's about 4.5, 5 feet tall. And it was important to have that prototype in early because the Unreal mannequin skeleton is 6 feet tall. So it would have felt wrong building out stuff for that scale of the character and those proportions that we had. While it looked ugly, it helped the character artist and concept artist use that as a really ugly framework to do their work and creation on it. The next steps on the character creation was actually once we had some funds and resources, we were able to actually move forward and totally realize the vision that we had with our character. It was through mistakes and lessons learned, because it was the first time going through that process myself. We tried to outsource it without someone that was owning that kind of vision outside of myself, who is not experienced in that communication style. And we ended up with a style that when I closed my eyes and kind of envisioned what the game could be, while I might not have been able to describe it, it wasn't kind of what we wanted. From that point, we kind of had to like press pause, really started integrating art into the team as like a full-time hire. And luckily we had the resources to do that at that time. Our main lead artist, Allison, found him on ArtStation. I liked his work. After talking to him, and I kind of just cold emailed him to see if he wanted to chat. Right after the first call, I was like, I really want to work with him. He took over the art pipeline and made it incredible. And that second person he introduced to us was Daniel, who's a character artist. And that artist was able to kind of like translate some of those early visions and goals of like, hey, we want an approachable character that is a woodland creature that really is culturally agnostic. And took that, started working with a character artist that they were really confident in and had worked with. And that's where the first iteration of the new modern character design was created. That second person he introduced to us was Daniel, who's a character artist and was able to kind of create the characters that we have today. After that, we hired a concept artist that then took the work that those two did, and Bruna, she was able to really refine and make small tweaks that initially aren't that noticeable, where it's like, oh, I'm gonna curve the fur a little bit here. And those small tweaks really add to just the overall quality that I wouldn't have been able to notice, but when you kind of look back at old footage, it's like, wow.
This is their kind of fan work. Kind of minimalist, but also showing character and detail and personality. And then here's some random stuff that I pulled. So like Tunic, Fox is adorable, so that's like always a good reference. This Highland cow is amazing. And then this was like a sketch from actually the artist that we just hired that was like talking about it. So I think that gives a good indication of like, hey, like look at all the characters and how friendly and nice they can be. With some of that and like some of the limitations on like poly count and like, hey, like we want our characters to be this big, or like here's the world, we shared the game with them. And this is a weird chicken and egg thing that really this should have been done a year ago, but we didn't have the funding to be able to pay artists properly for it. So yeah, this is what they came back with for the early concepting stage. That is already looking great. Like there's a lot of different styles. And you can kind of see like this is like the chibi style. And then really when kind of thinking about these two were by far what I think fit most with our art style in the game. I guess like one of the downsides of these two, they're really good in 2D, but there was concerns about like 3D and animation and like how well they would fit in a world. And so it became down to these two. And this one's great, but it maybe doesn't fit as well with the established art style. And so if we had this one from the get-go, we might go this way. But so we're kind of going this style with like the kind of rounded, you get the tufts. There's like a couple notes, like you get notes of like, oh, okay, actually the legs are a little long, let's bring them down. Can we make it a little pudgier? It's a little skinny. The hand right here and gripping the shovel, that was really, it's great, but we don't actually want to have like all the digits like animatable. We kind of want them to be more mitts, but not even like with a thumb, like more of a paw where it curls. So like if we think about when we get into the animation stage, like there's a joint like on my tip of my finger kind of, and then here, and so like they can at best like it won't even have the digits. So basically it just fold over on itself rather than like having to animate all the hand movement. And that doesn't really make sense for most of these animals anyways. They have paws, it fits with the stuff. So anyways, those were some of the comments that I had given. And this morning I got another one, and so they're now on to the coloring stage. And honestly, like all these look great to me. This is our generic Fox anyways, that the player can do whatever they want to it. So like the colors already show like, hey, there's cool customization. Like all four of these would be great anyways, but we'll just probably pick this one. I think that's next is they do profiles or whatever they call them, where it's like front, side, and then that will be approved. Then it'll go into the 3D modeling stage where someone in Maya or whatever the program they use, they'll model it out. That'll go through approvals. Then it'll be texturing and UVing and doing that, and then we'll get it, and then we'll actually have a character that's real in the game, and then we'll have to start animating it. And then if this works out and we like the whole process, so this was like the first kind of trial run with them for one character, we could start adding more characters. So that's kind of all exciting news.
The animation is the kind of the next step of all the work that has to go in. And while there's millions of animations that you can have that are library assets that you just pay for, and like you can get a million different walk run cycles. But for our game being stylized characters, different proportions, they have a tail, their arm lengths are different, their leg lengths are, their torso is a little bit longer, so their leg lengths are slightly different. They're a little bit more portly in a way. If we took the typical 6-foot character and tried to scale it down on our characters, it would look terrible. We had a really talented animator doing it initially, but unfortunately the time zone and some technology hurdles that we had didn't quite work out, and so we brought in another animator named Cesar, who's again based on the recommendation of our amazing lead artist, Allison. Our Brazilian artists are all amazing, and so we actually now work with 4 Brazilians on the team. But really, I think these the Brazilian artists that we have been underutilized by the game industry. And so some of them were artists working on Overwatch, but they were kind of treated more as a just external contracting studio rather than integrated with the team. For us, we've really embraced their ability and their quality and their skill level to really help support the game.
When we think about how do we add a stylistic flair to the game, an element that we consider a lot about is how does the texture feel? Does it make you feel cozy and comfy? And when we work backwards from there, there are certain lighting fundamentals that we rely on. So the game is being built on Unreal Engine, and fortunately there's a lot of parameterization that exists in the material system. And so one of those is how reflective is light on a particular surface. The more reflective a surface is, the more plasticky or metallic something looks. And so we can achieve a lot of softer feel by tamping down how reflective a particular material is. And similarly, there's a lot of other parameters that indicates to the viewer as to how soft a particular thing is. For instance, like subsurface scattering is one way to understand how light penetrates an object, bounces around, and then bounces back out. Fur is another great example. Fur and hair is a very complicated lighting process in that some light is bouncing off the surface directly, some of it is going deeper into the fur, and so we have to sort of approximate what does the lighting color and change, and how does that change as the light bounces around. And of course, in a real-time video game, we're approximating all of that. One of the advantages we have is that we're a stylized game, so a lot of it we can sort of fake or take a lot of creative licenses with. When we think about lighting the characters and lighting the world, we actually treat them as two different, I don't want to say layers, but that's conceptually you can at least think about it in that way. We have lighting channels that we're currently using where one lighting channel is meant for the entire environment, and we are able to do certain post-processing effects or certain lighting responses for one channel and then vary them for the channel that the characters live on. And so while they're composited in the same frame and in the same environment, we do have parameters that we can control for one lighting channel versus the other. And that's the sort of the same approach that we take for our characters. An example of this would be the sort of artificial rim lighting that is always there in the character to help it stand out a little bit from the environment itself. Of course, there isn't an actual literal light following the character around, but it's something that we can do in the shader just by looking at the Fresnel response of the character's mesh.
What we were noticing with our stylized characters is that they look really great when kind of you have a neutral background behind them, but with our kind of vibrant ambient worlds, it was sort of hard to distinguish when the backgrounds were also vibrant. So in the material itself, there's a little bit more ambient occlusion to help pop the character from the background, so it reads a little bit better. At the same time, we don't want them overly shaded, so the material that we're using is custom built so that it's more stylized. It's not cell shading, of course, but like there's a little bit softness in the characters that they just fit in the world, because a full perfect PBR lighting, so physically based rendering lighting, probably wouldn't look great for all of our things in our game, but we still want that real dynamic lighting in our game as well. So we do cheat a lot in how we render our characters. Customization is super important in our gameplay because players want to create self-expressions of themselves. In it, you get to play as a fox, and from there we're like, what other creatures do we want? So cat, dog are kind of the most obvious. We've announced the game already and we've had a flood of different people, so I was surprised at how many different requests we had for like cows, sheep, bears, lizards, frogs.
Goats, do goats.
Goats. There's definitely goats. So we'll have to keep it in scope, but ideally, like we've built out a material system that changes out the eyeballs shapes, so there's a little bit of uniqueness in the eye and the eye color, the fur patterns. So again, we're masking the materials. So ideally, you have a lot to start changing your self-expression, whether it's color, fur patterns, the type of animal you want to play as, or the clothing that you choose. Working on the character was probably one of the most challenging things I've done in game development, and I honestly didn't do a lot of the heavy lifting and work on it. Definitely the most stressful part of that process was the fear of when you close your eyes and you think of the character and then you see what's in the game, they don't match, and you don't have enough words or talent to like communicate that or build it yourself. And so not knowing if you're actually ever gonna get to that point that you envision of that perfection. And again, like ideas are cheap. You can have a great concept in your head, but if there's not people to execute on it, it doesn't matter.
I think a lot of the work has been on the stylistic side because, of course, we started with some very temporary art from Riley. We went through some really challenges with some really horrifying looking versions. And I think what Daniel and Bruna and Allison on the team have been able to do with the latest versions, we're really, really happy with.